Hi, I'm Danny with Tax 29 Tax Service.
And I'm Andy. You know, Danny, the prices of everything keeps going up and up.
Inflation.
Well, at Tax 29, we said enough. We're keeping our pricing structure the same this year as what we had last tax season.
So whether you file in one of our local offices or whether you file with us online at tax29.com, you'll get the same professional tax prep at affordable pricing along with year-round service.
For a list of our pricing or to find out more, stop by one of our local offices or visit us at tax29.com.
What's the real story? How did all of this come to be? Was it all by chance, or did something or someone design everything? Join us as we learn from our host, William Henry, and discover that the story of the Earth and our universe is really his story.
Welcome to Discovering His Story, a production of Youngstown Christian Television. In this program, we seek to examine secular historical record and compare it with the biblical historical record and see how they intertwine with one another, giving us a greater faith in the biblical historical record and also giving us a background by which we can understand the Bible better. We're looking in our study at ancient times and particularly at the civilization of Greece. The last time we were together, we were looking at the different historical aspects of the development of Greek society, particularly on the island of Crete. We also looked at Greek mythology and at the beginning of the Olympics and what was involved in the Olympics. Today we want to continue looking at Greece, but look at the role of the city-states in Greece. If you look at this map, you'll see that Greece, and in fact what is also shown on here, what is modern-day Turkey or Asia Minor, is very mountainous. All of these mountain ranges lent itself to cities coming into existence at every little valley. So unlike parts of the Levant or Mesopotamia where a city grew up and it was able to expand over an area, because of the mountainous nature of Greece, that did not happen as much. So we had different cities growing up at every little location, every little valley where people settled. The name for a city-state is the word polis, or polis, someone might pronounce it. Polis is the word for a city, and it's the basic political unit of Greece. Now, we have a number of words that have come into the English language, and here in the United States in particular, that come from this Greek word polis. Let's see if you can think of some. Maybe you thought of politics, or politician, or police, or some use the expression the body politic. Or we have some names of cities like Indianapolis, Annapolis, Minneapolis. Notice the name polis is in each of those words, and it comes from this Greek idea of a city-state. Now, among those city-states, because they were so separated, they developed differently, and so there are lots of different ways that they came to govern themselves. But before we look at that, I thought you'd be interested in seeing some pictures of a very mountainous area of Greece called Meteora. These are the mountains of Meteora. Now, I don't know if you can see it there, but about the center of the picture, on top of one of these mountains sticking up is a building. There's a little bit closer look. These are monasteries, and there are a number of these monasteries that were built on top of mountains in the region called Meteora. Here's another look at the mountains. There's just tremendous height to these mountains that just seem to stick up out of the earth. You can see to the left there, one of the monasteries built on top of that mountain. There's a look down from another mountain at this one. Now, the way that these monasteries were built is very interesting. There were no roads going up to the top of these mountains. Someone had to climb all the way up there and then haul everything up by rope. So that for centuries, the only way to access many of these monasteries was to either climb up by rope or attach yourself to the rope and be hauled up. And that's how they got all the materials up there to build the monastery as well. So it's an amazing thing to look at and consider. The monastery that we went to did have a road that went to it that had been built sometime in the far past. But it was very interesting to look at and to see the beauty of the countryside around as well. Well, let's get back to the government of the city-states. There are 4 different forms of government that occurred in the city-states of ancient Greece. One is monarchy, which, as you know, is rule by one. In fact, that word is a Greek word, the combination of monos and archos, our word monarchy. And then there's oligarchy, another Greek word which means rule of the few. Some of the Greek city-states were ruled by tyranny, that is, complete control by the government. And then very few, in particular, as we'll see, Athens was ruled by democracy, that is, ruled by the people. So 4 basic forms of government that we find even today that come down through history, we can see being established here in the city-states of Greece. So how did these city-states develop, at least the major ones we're going to look at? First of all, we'll look at Sparta. Sparta was established by the Dorian invasion, which we talked about previously. The Dorians came down from north of Greece down into Greece. Some went on down to Crete, and some went as far as the city that would be called Sparta. They conquered the inhabitants of that area and called them Helots. And thereafter, the Helots were slaves of the Spartans, who were originally Dorians. They were a thoroughly militaristic state. The expression that was given by mothers and wives and girlfriends to their loved men as they went off to war was return with your shields or on them. So don't come back a loser. Either come back victorious or dead. So that's where Sparta is located, in somewhat the middle of the lower part of Greece. And you can see some of the other cities around there as well. The training for the Spartan soldiers was rather intense. Training started at the age of 7. Physical training, of course, was a must. The training was harsh but effective. After all, they're training soldiers. Each soldier learned absolute and unwavering loyalty. They also learned to swim, jump, run, wrestle, box, and most importantly, dance. Dance, you say? These don't seem like the kind of fellows that would be dancing. Well, I'm reminded of one of my favorite football players, Lynn Swann. Played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he was a great wide receiver. And one day it came out that in the off-season he spent time learning ballet. He claimed that it helped him to be able to maneuver and to jump on the football field and make those fantastic catches. Well, the Spartans believed it was important to learn how to dance because that enabled them to maneuver as they were fighting. And the statement about the Spartans is they do not ask how many, but where. They're in for the battle. So the Spartan people were expert warriors. At the age of 20, they were named a fully fledged warrior. They only knew one home and family, and that was the barracks in their unit. So from the time they left the family to become a soldier, they did not really return, and not to live anyway. Girls were also given rigorous training so that they would become mothers of healthy children. Their women were regarded as the most beautiful on all Hellas, that's the ancient name for Greece, and as tough in spirit as men. And as we've said, come back with your shield or on it. Now in Sparta, they pursued an oligarchical form of government, that is a rule by the few. There were 2 kings that ruled the city, but a 28-member council of elders limited their powers. These men were recruited from the highest social class, the aristocratic Spartiates. Spartiates, that's the aristocrats. Rather like medieval knights, the Spartiates were a class of military professionals who lived most of their lives in communal barracks. Rarely seeing their wives and children, their lands were farmed by slaves, leaving them free to pursue to the arts of war. Beneath this highest class was a middle class called the Perioeci, made up of farmers and artisans who were the descendants of those peoples whom the Spartans had first conquered. The Perioeci paid taxes and could serve in the army, but had no real political rights. At the bottom were the Helots, a slave class descended from those peoples who had resisted subjugation by Sparta. Because the Helots were constantly rebelling, the Spartans attempted to control them by forming a secret society that annually murdered any Helot suspected of encouraging subversion. Now, in Sparta, you might accuse them of being ethnocentric isolationists. They did not believe that there should be anything outside of Sparta of interest. So no travel abroad unless you had permission. They discouraged any contact with the outside world. And foreigners, if they entered the city, must leave when there was no longer any reason for them to stay. Those might be good family rules. What do you think? Force was used to establish oligarchies in neighboring city-states, organized as the Peloponnesian League with Sparta as its head. So that's the city of Sparta. The main ingredients are very militaristic and an oligarchy as its government. Oh, by the way, I didn't mention that when a baby was born, they tried to determine whether this baby looked like it would be a healthy addition to the army as a boy or to motherhood as a girl. And if it was deemed that it was not the case, then they would simply leave them out on the mountainside to die. Athens presents a little bit friendlier picture as we move there. Athens, as a city, nurtured creativity, commercial endeavors, democracy, and individualism. As you look at this map of Athens by picture, You can see up in the upper left the temples to Athena, 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is on the Acropolis, the high hill outside of Athens. By the way, I've always heard Acropolis used to refer to that hill in Athens, but I found that in Greece the name Acropolis was given to the high hill above any city. So each one would be called Acropolis. As we move down here, you see number 6, the Citizens Road. 7, there's the altar to 12 gods. And it's likely that altar that Paul passed as he entered the city of Athens, and to which he referred when he's addressing the philosophers and telling them, I saw your altars to the gods, and especially one to the unknown God. And also, as we saw earlier when he comes in, how he is distressed by seeing these altars to all these gods. If you look down at 8 and 14, find 8 over sort of towards the bottom, 14 across from it, those are covered walkways, and most likely the area in which the agora would take place, the marketplace. 9 is a building there, is the council hall. 10 and 13, see 10 next to the council hall, 13 across the way from it, those are law courts. There's a temple of Hephaestus at number 11, which is back behind the law courts and behind the council hall. There's a military hall then over to the right a little bit. There's an open air high court at number 15, that's way back in the back there towards the upper part. And the amphitheater, number 16, which is a little ways away from the Acropolis, the amphitheater. I have a picture that I'll probably show to you later of how that looks today. So that's the layout of the city of Athens. And as I said, that middle area that's all kind of open was most likely where the agora took place, where people would set up shop to sell things every day, as the Athenians had to purchase things like food and other supplies. Well, here in fact is what the agora would have looked like. You can see some of the buildings there are permanent, and there might be shops in those buildings that were permanent, but people would also come in and set up tents, at which those that were coming through would stop and purchase the items for sale there. So that's a market, and again the word is agora. Let's look now at the Acropolis. This is the Acropolis from the distance. You can see the Parthenon on top of this hill, this highest hill around Athens. And going up to the Acropolis, we found ourselves passing by some large structures, and at first I wondered, is this part of the Parthenon? Because I couldn't see the Parthenon from where we were, but came to find out that this area was called the Propylaea. It's a union of the prefix pro, which means before or in front of, plus the plural of mule, which means a gate. So meaning literally that which is before the gates. So this was impressive in itself, just walking by this area. Next, we would, on our way up, we came by on our right-hand side the temple of Athena Nike. So remember before we talked about Athena being the goddess of Athens, the goddess of wisdom, and Nike being the goddess of victory. And so this is a small temple dedicated to the Greek goddess Athena Nike. This structure was built around 420 BC and is the earliest fully Ionic temple. If you understand different architecture styles, Ionic is one of them, and it's the earliest one on the Acropolis. The next picture we see the Parthenon. Unfortunately, the constant repair of the Parthenon it means that they're scaffolding up, which kind of destroys the view a little bit, but you get a sense of what it looked like at least. And then here is, from another angle, the columns you can see there. And as you can tell from this angle, you can tell that the columns narrow as they get towards the top. That really is done intentionally so that further away it looks like it's totally straight. It's an optical illusion. Above the columns, there was much artwork that is not visible here. Now from there, you can look at the theater below. And you can see that it was built to use the hillside as part of where the audience sat. And it's really difficult to see in this picture what a large area was, because as you can tell on the right-hand side, the stone seating continues up the side of the hill and continues on much beyond what is there now. So this theater would have seated quite a large number of people, all sitting up the hill so they could hear what was being said down on the stage. Here's another view of the Parthenon then, and you can see maybe a little more of the artwork above the pillars. And another. Of course, it had a roof on it when it was built, but that has since been destroyed. The next building that's on the Acropolis is called the Erechtheion. This is the Erechtheion. It's dedicated to both Athena and Poseidon. It's an ancient Greek temple, of course, and dedicated to two gods. It's just a little ways away on the Acropolis from the Parthenon. This was an interesting porch of the maidens that was attached to this temple. There are 6 draped female figures that are acting as supporting columns, as you can see there. The porch actually doesn't go anywhere. You don't enter the temple through that. It was built to conceal the giant 15-foot beam needed to support the southwest corner of the building. Here it is from the other direction, from the front. Again, the original roof is not there. Here it is on another side, the side facing away from the building, from all the buildings. And there's an olive tree there, which represents the choice that the people had between Athena and another god who we're going to serve. And Athena said, well, if you pick me, I'll give you wisdom. And so they chose Athena rather than Poseidon. And so the olive tree is there to represent the wisdom that Athena brought to the city. And there's a picture a little bit further away. Now from the Acropolis, I made another, what was for me an astounding discovery, and that is the location of Mars Hill. I don't know if you remember in the book of Acts, the Apostle Paul comes into the city and he is proclaiming Jesus and the resurrection. The philosophers hear him and say, you know, we'd like to hear more about this. So they took him to their clubhouse, essentially, which is called Mars Hill. And I always envisioned that as being, you know, a nearby hill with lots of trees on it and green grass. I mean, where else would philosophers go to philosophize but a nice place like that? But that's not what it looked like at all. Here is Mars Hill. Yeah, it's that big rock-looking thing looking down from the Acropolis. And that's apparently where they took Paul to talk philosophy, and where Paul gave his famous address to them on Mars Hill. Here's a look at it from below. There are steps leading up to it. I'm not sure whether the steps were there at the time of Paul or not. They may have been. But as you go up the steps, they end when you get towards the top, and then you have to climb over a rock. It's called the Areopagus as well, the Latin form of the Greek word which is rendered Mars Hill. Paul addressed his memorable address to the men of Athens here. When you get up there have been so many people that have climbed on this for centuries that the rock is slippery. You have to be very careful. And in fact, I lost my footing at one point and fell on the most padded part of my body and did not get hurt. There's close to the top. I didn't climb all the way up, but that's close to the top of the Areopagus. Athens started out as a monarchy and then moved to an oligarchy consisting of a number of nobles with the chief magistrate, or archon, chief is that word, who was elected from the nobility. But then a guy by the name of Solon led Athens toward democracy in around the 6th century BC. Solon was a great leader, and he provided economic and political stability for Athens. He instituted reforms that helped the common man, such as forbidding the practice of making debtors into slaves. He created the Council of 400, who were representatives of all sections of Athens. So he's truly making Athens a place where people had more input and where individuality, creativity were encouraged. Now, following him, there were different people who gained control who were actually tyrants, but they also tried to do what was good for the city, brought reforms and reorganization of the government on behalf of the lower classes. Pericles, in the 5th century BC, led Athens then to a rule of the people. In 478, the walls erected around Athens enclosed an area of 3.5 square kilometers, including the Piraeus or harbor district. The full population of the city was over 140,000, but only 40,000 of these were full citizens, that is, they were males who were free. Athenian society was composed of 4 main social classes. At the bottom were the slaves. Then there were the metics, who were non-citizen free persons. Then there were women, and then there were citizens. But within each of these broad classes were several subclasses, such as the difference between common citizens and aristocratic citizens. Free men, that is, those who are not slaves, encompassed all male citizens of the city and were divided into numerous classes whose status reflected the degree to which they were self-reliant or reliant on others. Ideally, the Greeks believed that the professions that relied on the payment of others were less favorable than professions in which a citizen was seen to be self-sufficient, as farming. The slaves were the lowest class in Athenian society, but according to many contemporary accounts, they were far less harshly treated than in most other Greek cities. Indeed, one of the criticisms of Athens was that its slaves and freemen were difficult to tell apart. Well, as in most societies, a fundamental part of the economy was the slaves. And the slaves had such an integral part of what occurred in Athens that we need to spend a little more time on them, which we'll do next time on Discovering His Story.
What's the real story? How did all of this come to be? Was it all by chance, or did something or someone design everything? Join us as we learn from our host, William Henry, and discover that the story of the Earth and our universe is really his story.